morning, everyone. It seems like Joe Biden is going to be irrelevant. I really think they're going to parachute somebody else in for the convention or something to that effect. They'll have an emergency something or other, and somebody else will be the candidate. I don't think this is going to work. I could be wrong. They could run him, but can you imagine him on a debate stage with Trump? I mean, like, really? Wow. Between like Hunter Biden, Ukraine, and the fact that he's completely senile. You know, I don't know. Anyway, this is an interesting thing for a blue check mark to be tweeting. And I'm tweeting this just because it's notable for a blue check mark to be tweeting this, right? Like, he's not a journalist. He's a CEO for Yuko Social, a social media for politicians. He's Michael James Cordry. So it's interesting, notable. He says, quote, Joe Biden has 68 people watching his address. No one cares about Joe Biden. His polls are all fake. His support base is manufactured, and his votes will be created through fraud. If he wins, it will only show how much power Dem ops have over our elections infrastructure. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm surprised there weren't a lot of trolls on the replies to that, but I think that there's a lot of problems with Joe Biden, and I can't imagine him. I can't imagine him running the campaign. I mean, he's a disaster in the primaries, right? Like, and he's winning, but he's a disaster. And I mean, like, is that really what you want? There, I saw an article headline the other day, and I think I talked about it. Like, Joe Biden needs a running mate who's ready to be president on day one. It's like, that's not the kind of guy you want to vote for president. Yeah, anybody but this Trump guy, even this guy who's not going to stay in the job. It's weird. It's weird. Okay, Tim Hortons is tracking you. This is a bigger story than I was initially going to give it credit for. I was just going to do a headline, basically, because this is kind of known. But the level to which, and this is a good job done by the journalist. This is Financial Post article, so good job, Mr. McLeod. The level to which Tim Hortons is going to track people is quite far, and it's common, right? Like, this was going to be the end, but he says, like, he says, we're not at the cutting edge of this. We're on the blunt edge of a butter knife compared to the cutting edge collection and use of data. He's like, this isn't even like, he's like, I didn't even know. And I want to point out, like, if you are a company like Tim Hortons, the company's job is to make more money, right? Like, you just get a data point on a chart every day, right? And you see the data point on the chart. And if it's better than yesterday, you're happy. And if it's worse than yesterday, you say, what happened there? Why is that going down? And if there's a downward trend, that's worse. And if there's an upward trend, everybody's happy, right? So if you get a business that comes in and says, hey, I've got a tool that's going to help you make this go up more. And if the tool works, everybody's happy. The guy at the top usually doesn't understand the intricacies of how the tool works. Specifically, not the JSON, whatever, data and the data points collected, the intricacies of this, how often things are pinged. I can tell you CEOs don't have time for that, right? Like, that's details that they do not need to know. And why don't they need to know it? Because, I mean, that's the person on the app. If you work for Facebook or if you work for Tim Hortons to do their app, your job is to keep eyeballs on the app or do whatever the app's goal is. If you're in e-commerce or if you're in app development or whatever, you set goals. And then if the customer, the person using the app, does those goals, then your numbers go up, right? Like, it's all about tracking. And the reason that the reason that advertising dollars go to the internet over like print media is because you can track it. You can track it. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that front-facing cameras that face your face are checking how you respond to and react to news when you read it. Like, I feel like this CEO is not wrong. They're on the dull edge of a butter knife, and what they can do is incredibly detailed and incredibly fine-tuned. But CEOs don't know about this. They're looking at data points. They're looking at, did we increase sales? Did our employee numbers stay stable? Did our employment insurance claims remain at where they were? Did they go down? We didn't have any more of them. You know, if we did, let's fix that problem. Like, there are so many things to be dealt with when running a company like that, like Tim Hortons, that the details of the app, and regardless of whether you think they're important or not, can't be made a top priority for the CEO. And the job of the app person is to get the goal hit multiple times, as much as possible, right? And if their goal is to collect data, well, and which it seems to be, then, you know, they partner with other companies. And I mean, this situation as well. This is another company coming in saying, I have a tool that will make those data points increase for you. And the CEO is not going to know the details of a third-party tool. They're just going to say, here's the $1,000, here's the $10,000, here's the $15,000, whatever the agreement is, to access the tool, and it works. So wonderful, right? And it's almost like absolving yourself of the responsibility of it. But I mean, then you get press like this. So does it absolve you of the responsibility of it? I'm not sure. So here it is. Anyway, double tracking how Tim Hortons knows where you sleep, work, and vacation. I would never have consciously volunteered my home address, work location, and vacation plans to Tim Hortons, but the company found out anyways. I haven't been singled out for special treatment. For more than a year, the coffee chain has been tracking the movements of customers in exacting detail through its mobile ordering app. I've spent months sifting through my own data, and it's staggering how much the company knows about me. From my home to my office to my Blue Jays game at a Rogers Center, even all the way to Morocco, where I traveled on vacation last June, the company's app silently logged my coordinates and relayed them back to its corporate servers. But the reality is the companies have been tracking customers for years, and while Restaurant Brands International, RBI, the owner of Tim Hortons, isn't alone in this kind of corporate surveillance, the Tim's app demonstrates how huge amounts of intimate data can be collected without users realizing that it's happening at all. Location tracking is partly dictated by user choice and heavily influenced by a phone's operating system, so we don't know exactly how many people are being tracked by the company. But it's fair to say that Tim Hortons is logging the movements of a significant portion of the millions of Canadians who use its app in the same way the company was tracking me. I didn't realize how much until I saw my coordinates in a trove of data that RBI sent to me after I made a request under Canada's Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, PIPEDA, last fall. According to the data, Tim Hortons had recorded my longitude and latitude coordinates more than 2,700 times in less than 5 months, and not just when I was using the app. The Tim Hortons Chief Corporate Officer, Duncan Fulton, said users consent to this kind of tracking when they give the app access to GPS on their phone. If I didn't want the company to track my location in the background, even hours or days after I last used the app, Fulton said the onus is on me to deny the app such access. Within the Tim Hortons app, an FAQ covering privacy issues told customers that it tracks location only when you have the app open, but that did not appear to be entirely true based on the data RBI provided to me. After the Financial Post asked about the apparent discrepancy, the company changed its privacy statement to say that users' ability to limit location tracking varies depending on your device, and the company now states that users should check and understand your device's settings to make sure they're comfortable with how much location information they're sharing. I had no idea how extensive tracking data was until I saw it. There were readings taken at all hours of the day and night, and RBI kept tabs on me every time the app thought I was visiting one of its competitors. I scroll down a little bit. I only started to suspect there was more at play in October of 2018 when I received an unfamiliar notification on my phone. Tim Hortons got your location in the background. This app can always access your location. Tap to change. I began to wonder why the app would need to access my location even when I hadn't opened it in hours. It bothered me. How many more times had Tim Hortons checked in on me? Was my coffee ordering app tracking all my movements? I scroll down a little bit more. Spreadsheets contained, these are spreadsheets got by access to information request. The spreadsheets contained only basic profile information, but the text files were huge, containing thousands of pages of computer code in a format known as JavaScript Object Notation, JSON. I don't know. Altogether, the files contained 2,843 lines of code, with each line recording a batch of information pulled off my phone and logged in RBI servers. Even the most benign batches revealed an impressive level of detail. Many of them recorded my interactions with Tim Hortons app from launching the app through to checkout. For each interaction, the app recorded that I was using a Pixel XL running an Android operating system. The app routinely logged my IP address, Android advertising ID and carrier, TELUS, and that I had enabled Bluetooth. Many lines of code would list the amount of free disk space on my device and even how much charge the battery was holding. The first few months of data did not include any location information. In March 2019, longitude and latitude readings began to appear in a handful of batches. In the spring of 2019, Tim Hortons launched a new version of its app and started using the services of Radar Labs, a Brooklyn-based company whose website states it's unlocking the next generation of location-aware product and service experiences. This is the person who has the thing that'll increase the data points, right? It'll go up, I promise, right? According to Radar's website, which lists Burger King as a client, it tracks the phones that have apps employing its technology. So if Tim Hortons partners with these guys, then and they have an app employing their technology, it's on your phone. Okay, you see. Usually they'll ping those apps every 3 to 5 minutes when the user is in motion. Beginning in May 2019, about a week before Tim Hortons introduced a loyalty program, a new radar section began to appear with each JSON batch of data the company was collecting on me. These sections contained longitude and latitude readings, as well as a series of other observations indicating RBI was using at least 2 of Radar's products, Places and Insights. Using Places, Radar generated JSON batches with the app. When the app thought I was at one of Tim Hortons' competitors, there are snippets in the JSON code that read event name, user entered place, and a couple lines down, place chain name, Starbucks. According to these batches, Tim Hortons was using the radar service to track me every time it thought I may have entered Starbucks, Second Cup, McDonald's, Pizza, A&W, KFC, or Subway. Notably, those fast food outlets appear to be competition for Tim Hortons, as well as Burger King and Popeyes, Louisiana Chicken, 2 other fast food chains owned by RBI. The Tim Hortons data recorded hundreds of user-entered place or user-exited place events. And this is kind of just it goes through in much more detail about how radar works and how much data is being tracked. I've given you a good taste. It's incredible. It's a lot. Back to this. Radar Chief Executive Nick Patrick declined to answer a series of questions from the Financial Post, saying in an email, as a practice, we don't comment on any of our individual customers. This is the guy who owns Radar. I mean, isn't that a wonderful thing to hide behind? Oh, I'm sorry, we don't do that. We don't answer questions we don't like. So that's just corporate policy. So if you get back to us with a question we'd like to answer, we'd love to help you. Have a good day. I feel like Ferris Bueller, right? You know the part where he's at the restaurant and he's the sausage king from... Doesn't matter. Back to this. Fulton, Tim Hortons chief operations officer, initially said he wasn't aware of whether Radar is storing more data on me, but said he'd check. In a follow-up email, he said Radar deletes GPS location data on a rolling 12-month basis. My immediate thought was, when was that policy initiated? When did that start? And I'll remind you from the beginning of this, Fulton said he believes that kind of data collection that RBI is doing is commonplace. If you have the Burger King app, if you have the McDonald's app, if you have other apps that employ this data, and I don't have a list, it's commonplace. And this is the blunt edge of the butter knife. We're not on the cutting edge of this. We're in the blunt edge of a butter knife compared to the cutting edge collection use of data, he said. Your phone is a surveillance device that you gleefully carry and play games on. Amazing Polly was right. Here is Miss Lucki. Yesterday I did an in-depth interview. I didn't do an interview yesterday. An in-depth look at Miss Lucki's interview with, I can't remember, the news person. And I thought she did an okay job because she totally redefined what defunding the police meant. She said, yeah, I could go along with my redefinition of that. And so yesterday she walked it back. She said systemic racism exists in the RCMP. She was saying that, we've been doing this for a long time. We've been doing lots of training. We've been doing this, having this conversation, and everybody's on board and blah, 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 blah. Here she is yesterday clarifying her statement. She says, systemic racism exists in the RCMP, Commissioner Brenda Lucki says. RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki said today that she believes systemic racism exists in the police force she leads after telling several media outlets this week that she was struggling to define the term. I did acknowledge that we, like others, have racism in our organization, but I did not say definitively that systemic racism exists in the RCMP, Lucki said in a media statement. I should have. This is the media equivalent of take a knee, Miss Lucki. Quote, as many have said, I do know that systemic racism is part of every institution, every single one, the RCMP included. Throughout our history and today, we have not always treated racialized and indigenous people fairly. So she's completely selling out her force and kowtowing to the woke left, who is led by our prime minister, who probably had a phone call with her and said, you need to confirm this. How is the RCMP... Where could you please define where the RCMP is racist, or just the government agencies, Indigenous Services Minister? Where do you see the racism in our systems? Here you go. Here's the quote.
You cannot look at the institutionalization of incarceration, of the overrepresentation of Black and Indigenous peoples in the penal system, and not have to re-examine systemic racism. You can't look at the underemployment.
We'll just leave it at the penal system. That's the first one, the go-to, right? If you know anything about arguments, you give your second best argument first, and then your best argument last, right? You want to really punch them out. Here is a anonymous Berkeley professor shreds Black Lives Matter injustice narrative. Okay, I'm just going to read. This is a long letter. It is worth the read. You should read this. I was playing with the idea of reading it, but it's long and I don't know. But I'm going to read this part of it. Okay, so this is a UC Berkeley history professor's open letter against Black Lives Matter, police brutality, and cultural orthodoxy. This is just a highlighted part. Okay, in the extended links and resources you provided, I could not find a single instance of substantial counter-argument or alternative narrative to explain the underrepresentation of Black individuals in academia or their overrepresentation in the criminal justice system. The explanation provided in your documentation, to the near exclusion of all others, is unvariate. The problem of the Black community are caused by whites, or when whites are not physically present, the infiltration of white supremacy and white systemic racism into American brains, souls, and institutions. Many cogent objections to this thesis have been raised by sober voices, including from within the Black community itself, such as Thomas Sowell and Wilfred Riley. These people are not racist or Uncle Toms. They are intelligent scholars who reject a narrative that strips Black people of agency and systemically externalizes the problems of the Black community onto outsiders. Their view is entirely absent from the department and UBC-wide communiques. The claim that the difficulties that the Black community faces are entirely causally explained by exogenous factors, in the form of white systemic racism, white supremacy, and other forms of white discrimination remains a problematic hypothesis that should be vigorously challenged by historians. Instead, it is being treated as axiomatic and actionable truth without serious consideration of its profound flaws or its worrying implication of total Black impotence. The hypothesis is transforming our institution and our culture without any space for dissent outside of a tightly policed, narrow discourse. A counter-narrative exists. If you have time, please consider examining some of the documents I attach at the end of this email. Overwhelmingly, the reasoning provided by Black Lives Matter and its allies is either primarily anecdotal, as in the case with the bulk of a Ta-Nehisi Coates' undeniably moving article, or it's transparently motivated. And as an example of the latter problem, consider the proportion of Black incarcerated Americans. The proportion is often used to characterize the criminal justice system as anti-Black. However, if we use the precise same methodology, we would have to conclude that the criminal justice system is even more anti-male than it is anti-Black. Devastating. Devastating. What are the numbers? Male and female for incarcerations across all populations in Canada. Are they exactly 50-50? No. Why not? Do we have an anti-male justice system in Canada? Is it discriminating against men at an unreasonable rate? Hashtag men's lives matter? Back to this. With the characterizing of criminal justice as systemically misandrist conspiracy against innocent American men, I hope you see that this type of reasoning is flawed and requires a significant suspension of our rational faculties. Black people are not incarcerated at higher rates than their involvement in violent crime would predict. This fact has been demonstrated multiple times across multiple jurisdictions and multiple countries. And yet I see my department uncritically reproducing a narrative that diminishes Black agency in favor of a white-centric explanation that appeals to the department's apparent desire to shoulder the white man's burden and to promote a narrative of white guilt. If we claim that the criminal justice system is white supremacist, why is it that Asian Americans, Indian Americans, and Nigerian Americans are incarcerated at vastly lower rates than white Americans? This is a funny sort of white supremacy. Even Jewish Americans are incarcerated less than genteel whites. I think it's fair to say that your average white supremacist disapproves of Jews, and yet these alleged white supremacists incarcerate Gentiles at vastly higher rates than Jews. None of this is addressed in your literature. None of it is explained beyond hand-waving and ad hominems. Those are racist dog whistles. The model minority myth is white supremacist. Only fascists talk about black-on-black crime ad nauseum. Devastating. And if you think for half a second, it applies exactly here. And our government is unfortunately using racism to be more divisive. It's worse than ever. Here's CTV News. How to watch CTV's Racism in Canada special this weekend. What do you notice about the 4 hosts of the Racism in Canada special? Not one of them is white. The far left host, I can't remember her name, hold on. Anne Marie Mediwoke? I don't know. Mediwoke? I don't know what her last name is. I apologize. Names are not my thing. No offense, Anna Marie. She's born in Sri Lanka to a Sri Lankan father and an Irish mother, which is wonderful. I love diversity. But isn't it strange that there's no room on the Racism in Canada special for a white person? Isn't it weird? Isn't that odd to note? Jagmeet Singh, moving on, is not happy about grocery chains pulling the $2 an hour pandemic pay bump. He's unhappy about that. He says, look at all the corporate welfare we gave you. 12 million for fridges, 475 million for Caribbean tax havens, 240 million profit off the pandemic, and CEO receives $7 million. How dare you pay your CEO and not pay $2 an hour to frontline workers? This is more division, right? This is using division to get votes. This is interesting. Moving on. This is the last story for this morning because I'm already... Okay, I'm good. 21. Okay. The mask thing. Okay, at the beginning of the pandemic, when people were... Miss Tam, WHO, everybody was saying, don't wear masks. People who aren't sick shouldn't wear masks. It actually has potential to make you more sick. Everybody was saying that mask wearing was a bad idea. While we were landing flights from infected areas, while we were doing all sorts of other things, mask wearing was not necessary. And now they're saying new study says masks significantly reduce infection risk, likely preventing thousands of COVID-19 deaths. Now, the interesting thing, the non-surgical masks, non-N95 masks don't stop the virus. It would be like they don't stop the virus from getting through. It would be like trying to use your underwear to stop a fart, right? Like, please don't smell. Please don't smell. It's not going to work, man. Like, no. And so the idea that anything less than an N95 mask is preventing infection is well, they create studies to say anything they want, right? New study says masks significantly reduce infection risk. Here's the CDC, and I linked to the CDC website, but here's what it says. Basically, disposable masks, also known as surgical masks, are loose-fitting devices that were designed to be worn by medical personnel to protect accidental contamination of patient wounds and to protect the wearer against splashes or sprays of bodily fluids. There's limited evidence for their effectiveness in preventing influenza virus transmission, either when worn by the infected person for source control or when worn by uninfected persons to reduce exposure. Our systemic review found no significant effect of face masks on transmission of laboratory-controlled influenza. Now, that's not talking about COVID-19, but it's the inconsistency in the information that concerns me, because the history of the recommendations of no masks was WHO and long-standing from the 2009 H1N1 pandemic recommendations. But all of this is, oh, look at this new study. We figured out masks work. Everybody has to wear a mask. We're going to mandate masks. Welcome to Guelph. And another thing, we're going to continue landing people, but now we're going to screen air travelers for fever. Now? In June? Now? Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Let's start behaving now to contain this thing. Hard eye roll. Are you joking? Like, I keep saying it would be funny if it was a parody or if it was happening to some other backwards country, but it's happening to our backwards country. And it seems like there's nothing we can do to stop it. The opposition can't even get the House of Commons back at this point in time. Like, oh, okay, good luck. You guys want to pass something? All right, like have fun. We're just gonna continue spending money until we can't spend money anymore, and we're gonna continue doing this until what, for another 4 months? Till September? All right, sounds super fun. Sounds like we've really got a handle on this whole thing. Yep. Definitely not, the wheels aren't falling off of the federal government. I mean, like, yeah, and I just feel like they think that they're doing a great job, and they're definitely not, because they're driving wedges like this, right? This is what 5 years of liberal governance does. Unbelievable. And it's not like they've been good economically. It's not like they've been good for business. It's not like they've been good for indigenous relations or trade relations or relations across the border with our biggest trading partner, the United States, or internationally. It's not like they've been good on any of these files. And yet they're sitting here shaming Canadians and introducing measures that should have been introduced potentially at the beginning of the pandemic when they would have helped instead of now. Maybe with accurate information, like N95 masks instead of just, oh yeah, whatever you can put on your face. Do you have a balaclava? Yeah. If it's got the nose cut out, then put something over that. Ridiculous. And I mean, it just makes me sad to have these people continue to represent me on the federal stage. Like, it's just ridiculous. How long are you going to do these reports from your cottage, Justin? After everybody goes back to work? How necessary is the government? Not necessary at all? The prime minister's okay to just stay in his cottage for, a whole year when there's a giant crisis, worldwide crisis? Yeah. Great leadership, dude. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, and check out SpeakingMoistly.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. It's the beginning of the weekend, and I think it's going to be nice. It's sunny anyway.